Thank you. So here's what we're going to do. I have material for you, and what I want to let you know what we're going to do just we'll have a timeline here. I'm going to go through some text quickly because I want to give you text. All right, so we're going to look at the story of Hannah. Then we're going to look at the Talmud Vogel, all right, about Hannah. Then I want you to be thinking about these texts, to think, how would you use the text? Right? I'm not going to tell you, I'll give you at the very end how I'm going to use the text. But I want you to think, and this is what Mark has been wonderful studying at the Shalom Hartman Institute, has taught me again to look at text anew. Right? And to take down all those presuppositions that we all have. And so, in fact, many of you know Ken Chasen. So when Ken and Denise and I were Hebruti, we were studying one time. Ken and I were studying Esther, which we all know pretty well. Right? So we were studying it together, reading it, and all of a sudden Ken turns to me and goes, "When the F did they put this in there?" Right? We looked at it, we go, "What? like that's in the text? I've never seen it before." So I know, is that we all have those moments.
What
right?
the F was it?
I can't remember I know the moment, but you can ask Ken. Maybe he'll remember what it was. But what I want to do, I'm going to read through quickly, and we'll try and point out some things in the Hannah text that we may not have, or you may not have noticed before. And then we're going to look at the Bavli, and we're going to go through the stuff quickly. We may do a little bit of the Aramaic. We'll see. But I want you to have text and then to be thinking, what does this mean to me? I will tell you that David Hartman loved the story of Hannah, right? But by the way, when it came to Abraham, right, he hated the Akedah. Right? As we all struggle with the Akedah, and it's sitting there in our faces, he hated the Akedah because he says, that's the wrong God. Right? It's the wrong Abraham. It's the wrong relationship. Right? And so for him, by the way, the story of the paradigm is the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. Right? Right? Hashafet kol haaretz mishpat, right? That how could God not be just? Right? For him, that's the story that should resonate in terms of how we relate to God and how we challenge God. So for him, the Akedah is completely wrong. Hannah, for him, says so much because we're going to see when we get to the Bavli, you all know this, the things that we learn from Hannah in terms of prayer. But I think there's much more to learn from prayer. So we're going to start in the text, all right, with the Shmuel, Aleph right there. So this is Shmuel 1:1. I'm just going to read quickly. Is that okay? We'll get through the text. We'll plow through it. Now there's a certain man of Ramat Sophim in Mount Ephraim. The name of was Elkanah, the son of Yeraham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Suf, and Ephrathite. He had two wives. The name of one was Hannah, the name of the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children. Hannah had no children. And this man went out of the city year by year to worship, to sacrifice to the Lord, hosts in Shiloh. The two sons of Eli, Hophni and Pinchas, priests of the Lord, were there. When the time was that Elkanah offered, he gave portions to Peninnah, his wife, to all her sons, and her daughters. To Hannah, he gave a worthy portion. By the way, in some translation, it's a double portion, right? Which makes us think of clearly of another story, right? That comes to mind. And the problems. For he loves Hannah, but the Lord had shut her womb. And her rival also provoked her to make her fret because the Lord had shut up her womb. And as she did so year by year, right? When she went up to the house of the Lord, so she provoked her. Therefore she wept and did not eat. Why didn't she eat? Did you ever know, right? She didn't eat. What didn't she eat?
The offering.
She didn't eat the offering, the sacrifice. Right? So, by the way, all that I'm going to teach this morning from text is really Hartman, whether it was David Hartman of blessed memory, Tova Hartman, by the way, who really deals with this text as well, Micha Goodman, it really is part of the Shitat Hartman in terms of understanding it. Right? So what did Tova Hartman say? Right? That mode of prayer, of relationship to God, was so abhorrent, she couldn't digest it. Right? That's how deep her struggle was. Like, to eat it would have made her sick. So she couldn't eat that sacrifice. She couldn't eat. All right? And why is thy heart aggrieved? Right? Am I not better to thee than 10 sons? So Hannah rose up after they had eaten in Shiloh and after they had drunk. Now Eli, the priest, sat upon a seat by the gatepost of the temple of the Lord, and she was in bitterness of soul and prayed to the Lord. Wept bitterly. She vowed a vow. O Lord of hosts, Adonai Tzvaot here, if thou wilt indeed look unto the affliction of thy handmaid to remember me and not forget thy handmaid, but wilt give thy handmaid a man-child, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of my life. No razor shall come upon him and his head. And to pass, she continued praying before the Lord, that Eli marked her mouth. Now Hannah spoke in her heart, we know this, al liba, we're going to talk about what that's going to mean. Only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought she was drunk. And Eli said to her, how long wilt thou be drunk, and put away thy wine from thee? And Hannah answered and said, no, my Lord. It's going to be important. No, my Lord. Okay? Some of you know this section. We're going to have to come back to this, right? All right? I'm a woman of a sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I have poured out my soul before the Lord. Take not thy handmaid for a worthless woman, for out of the greatness of my complaint and grief have I been speaking. Then Eli answered and said, go in peace. The God of Israel grant thee thy petition which thou hast asked of him. And she said, let thy handmaid find favor in thy sight. So the woman went her way and did eat. Okay? By the way, this is a happily biblical ending. Right? The rabbis struggle much more with the context and the content of this, but this is like, and they lived happily ever after. Right? So she gets a child, she can eat that sacrifice, and everything goes back to for better. And her countenance was no more sad. And they rose up in the morning early, worshipped before the Lord, returned, came to their house to Ramah. Elkanah had intimacy with Hannah, his wife. The Lord remembered her, and in due course Hannah conceived, bore a son. She calls his name Shmuel. All right, and so you know the end of the story. All right. First thoughts about the text. Anything that jumped out at you? Anything that you saw for the first time, or that you would take in terms of an important message? Yeah.
That she could eat after she prayed.
That she could
eat after she prayed.
That something transformed her, that she actually now, right, could eat. What else? Yeah, Naomi.
I don't know. It's funny. It's like every time I've read this, I think of what it means to not be able to eat. Not the rejection of the sacrifice, but anyone who's ever been in a state of utter grief or you just can't eat. There's nothing you can do. You can't eat. And when she's able to eat, she's able to get pregnant. And you look at, oh, God opened up her womb, or you can look at it the other way, which is a woman who doesn't eat is going to lose her period. And there's just an aspect to this about, it's like a sudat havra'ah, just, I'm going to be part of the world, I'm going to eat, and then everything else can unfold from there.
Right, so my view of life, whether to engage or not, is not going to affect just that moment, but actually it's going to play itself out in such profound ways, right? We can't even get that, and that we need to engage life. Beautiful. Other thoughts here? All right. Let's go to, because we'll just do Bavli. Come on, let's go there. And by the way, I did the Bavli for you so that you could actually tear these apart and you could look at the Aramaic and the Hebrew separately. I mean, the English rather. Right? So you know how you always want to, okay, what does that mean? Right, quickly? So it's just, so you can take it apart and look at it if you want to. We're going to do it, I'll start in the Aramaic because you're going to recognize most of it. We'll do that quickly. Then we'll go to the English, okay? So Talmud, all right? Brachot, all right? Kama helchata gavrata, ika lamashme mehane kare dechana. How many, right? So how many, right, laws are we going to learn? How many laws are we going to learn from Hannah? Right? We're going to learn 3 laws, okay, from her, okay? V'chana hi medaberet al liba, right? From the quote from Shmuel Aleph, Hannah spoke. By the way, what's interesting here in the Hebrew of the verse? Al. Al. Now, what does that mean? Al in this context.
Well, it's hard for it to mean prepositional on top of.
Right. Right?
Which is what we normally think of al meaning.
Exactly.
It must mean something else.
Right. By the way, Shema V'Hafta, right? We have the same, right? The same context, right? And so they say, put it on your hearts till it sits and it's ready, right? Is one interpretation. But this is strong language that is sitting right on her heart, right? Mikan l'mitpalel tzarish yikaven libo, right? That the person praying has to direct their heart. Rak shvateha na'ot, mikan l'mitpalel sheyachtov b'tzvatav, right? That you have to move your lips. The kolal lo yishamea mikan, right? So that her voice was not heard. Mikan, from here we learn shasur lagbia kolo b'tfilato. You can't raise your voice so the person next to you can hear it. right? By the way, do you ever, what's that gentle balance, by the way, that you can hear it and the person next to you can't? You ever think about what that means? Like, you're supposed to hear it, but the person next to you not. Right? I mean, what's the finitude of that? Right? What's that moment in which, right, that perfect moment in which you can hear it, but they can't? And what does that mean, by the way, in terms of what prayer means to you and to the person next to you? Right? That your prayers have to be yours. Right? And they have to be part of your essence, right? And they can't belong to someone else. Right? So let's keep going here. Vayomer mikan, where do we leave off there? Klobisfato, v'yachashveha ale lishora, right? Mikan sheshikor asur lehipalel. All right? So you're not supposed to be drunk during prayer. Vayomer aleha, Eli ad matai tishtacharin. Amar Rabbi Elazar mikan l'ro'eh v'chaveiro davar she'ino hagun tzarich lehalchicho. Right. So if somebody, what do we learn from this? That you have to, if someone needs to be chastised, that you have to, right, something unseemly, you have to let them know. All right. But why? So here, let's skip to the English. Go to the English. All right. It's going to help get us through. I really want to give you text. These sessions are not long enough. All right. We'll try and I'll dance back and forth. Let me see. Right? Ula said? No. Okay, ready to go. Rabbi Elazar said, from this we learn the one who sees his neighbor something unseemly must reprove him. Hannah answered and said, so here we go. And Hannah said, no, my Lord. Right? So, lo Adoni. Right? That was the text that we looked at. You, and what does it mean? You are no Lord. Right? Meaning the Shekhinah, the Holy Spirit, is not with you. In that you take the harsher and not the more lenient view of my conduct. Okay? I skipped one, sorry. Nor does the Holy Spirit rest on you that you suspected me of this thing. Some say, she said to him, you are no Lord. Meaning the Shekhinah and the Holy Spirit is not with you. In that you take the harsher and not the more lenient view of my conduct. This is, right? So Hannah says, right, you're no Lord. Like, you got it all wrong. What does Eli represent here?
Authority.
What? Who said it?
Authority.
The rabbinic, the religious authority. Right? The religious authority is Eli. And you know what? He doesn't get it. He doesn't get it. So, by the way, do we get what our congregants are there for? Do we really understand what they're there for? And I would argue, right, we very often do not. All right? And she goes on, right? Do you not know that I'm a woman of sorrowful spirit? I've drunk neither wine nor strong drink. Rabbi Elazar said, from this we learn that one who's suspected wrongfully must clear himself. Count not your handmaid for a daughter of Belial. There's a whole thing, by the way, Belial here, of being a form of idolatry, and you have to go through the text. A man who says to Belial when drunk is like one who serves idols. It is written here, count not the handmaid for a daughter of Belial. It's written elsewhere, so Gezerah Shabbat. Certain sons of Belial have gone forth from the midst of you, just as there are the terms used in connection with idolatry. So here, then Eli answered, let's go down, and she vowed a vow. She vowed a vow and said, O Lord of Sfa'ot hosts, right? Rabbi Elazar said, from the day that God created this world, there's no man who called the Holy One, blessed be Adonai Tzvaot. Right? So she's the first one ever to use that term. Now, by the way, the term does show up, but it's never uttered by an individual. Okay? Sorry? Adonai Tzvaot. Right?
What's the first place it's mentioned in the Tanakh?
First place in Tanakh, I will trust you. All right? I saw it in the Tanakh. Yeah. I'll trust Devorah, but I thought that had mentioned, because I thought in some of the commentaries they actually talked about that. But I will trust Devorah. We can look it up. So Hannah said, before the Holy One, blessed be He, sovereign of the universe, of all the hosts and hosts that you've created in your world, is it so hard in your eyes to give me one son? Right? You created so many things, just give me one. Come on. A parable. To what is this matter like? To a king who made a feast for his servants. A poor man came and stood by the door and said to them, give me a bite. no one took any notice of him. So he forced his way into the presence of the king, said to him, Your Majesty, out of all the feasts which you have made, is it so hard in your eyes to give me one bite? So what's Hannah doing here? How is she appealing to God? Is it a nice appeal? She's challenging God's very essence.
I would call it radical prayer.
Yeah, right.
It's also shaming God.
She's not right. I'm going to shame God. I'm going to make God feel guilty. I'm going to do whatever it takes to challenge, by the way, what I think is God's perception, right? God must be perceived, right, in terms and how a self-perception. By the way, at Har Sinai, Naomi, is it in there? Is it somewhere else or no?
Well, she's the first to call God that, but God, Adonai Tzvaot, appears earlier in the chapter.
Okay, so the first one. So it's Shmuel the first text, Naomi. Where's his first text? So that's where we're referring to Devorah. All right. So thank you. So where God, where Moses challenges God, remember on Har Sinai, it says, "Why are you going to destroy all the Israelites?" Right? As if he knows better what God's will is. This is a Hartman question, right? God has to make sense to us. If God doesn't make sense, then something's wrong. And I want to argue that the people who are in our pews are really struggling with God. And we're not doing much to help them. Now here's what I want to suggest, by the way. The Yamim Morim is the wrong time to radically challenge them. right? I want to suggest that all of your theologies that you would like to share, one might say this would be like on Pesach, right? In the middle of Pesach, taking away the Exodus from them. It might be, right? So if you dismiss the whole notion of God, right? Then they go, what the hell am I doing here? Right? By the way, we tend to focus on, all of us, personal reflection, right? Personal growth, relationships, all those things. But do we help our congregants, right, in terms of their theological growth and to challenge the ideas? And Hannah's the story. Hannah is the story that says, I'm not willing to accept the traditional idea of God. I'm going to challenge every idea that you have suggested about God. And Eli represents, the whole infrastructure represents this leadership, if you will. Let's continue. If you will indeed look, Rabbi Elazar said, Hannah said before the Holy One, blessed be He, sovereign of the universe, if you will look, it is well. Now, this is the greatest challenge. If you don't know this section, right? This is great, right? Great drama here. If you will look, it is well. If you will not look, right? If you won't pay attention to my request, if you're not going to grant it, what am I going to do? I'm going to go shut myself up with someone, right? I'm going to go in private with a man other than my husband, all right? With someone else, knowledge that my husband should know about it. And as I will have been alone, they'll make me drink the sota water, right? And now you, by the way, here, look at this. You cannot falsify your law, right? Your law says here, quote, she will be cleared and shall conceive seed. Right? So if a woman's not guilty of the accusation, as a result of going through the sota water, she will actually conceive. So she goes, is this what you want me to do? I can get a child. According to your law, I can do it. I just have to be suspected adulteress, and I'll go through this, and you must give me a child. Is that what you're going to make me do? All right? Now, this would be effective on the view of him who says that if the woman was barren, was visited. But now, by the way, the rabbis are going to want to argue. They said, no, this can't work like that. It couldn't be, can't possibly from sin have the sense of, of some reward. But on the view of him who says that if she bore with pain, she bears with ease. Right. So this is now going to be that. Right. This will be the consequence of the sota water. Not that you're going to be given a child, but rather your childbirth will be different. Okay. Right? That if she bore with pain, if you had difficult deliveries, now it's going to be really easy. Right? If she bore females, now she'll bear males. Let's not even go there. If she bore swarthy children, now she bears fair ones. Right? She bore short ones, shall now bear tall ones. What can be said as has been taught, she shall be cleared and shall conceive seed. This teaches she was barren, she is visited. So they're arguing back and forth. By the way, there's a whole discussion here about whether women, in this sense, should be taught Torah. Right? Right? Why shouldn't women be taught Torah?
Because they'll know how to subvert the law.
They'll know how to subvert the law. Right? So there's a whole undercurrent of discussion. Do you teach Torah to women? Because they're not going to, right? They're somehow going to take this and do it to their liking, and you can't do that. So, so Rabbi Ishmael, are we there? She'll be cleared. So Rabbi Ishmael said, Rabbi Ishmael. Rabbi Akiva said to him, if that is so, all barren women will go, right? And they'll shut themselves with someone who has not misconducted herself and will be visited. No, it teaches that she formerly bore pain, right, going back and forth. Let's go to the top of the next page. If you will indeed look on the affliction of your handmaid and not forget your handmaid. Right, so this is a quote now from the text. And there's a couple of quotes in which the term handmaid, right, is used 3 times. Okay, that's going to be the point, right? If you'll indeed look at the affliction of your handmaid, that's the end of one quote. This is verse 11, by the way. And if not your handmaid, it's from Shmuel Aleph in verse 11. And the next verse is, and not your handmaid, but I will give unto your handmaid. Right? Rabbi Yossi ben Hanina said, why these 3 handmaids? Hannah said before the Lord, the Holy One, blessed be He, sovereign universe, you have created in woman 3 bikei, right, metah. Some say that they are bikei metah, right? The difference between criteria or I didn't do signs of of your death, and the other ones are joints. It's a different understanding, minor thing. Namely, so what are the 3? Nida, Chala, and the kindling of Shabbat lights. Have I transgressed in any of them? So by the way, there's no response to this, really. No one argues. Right? Her plea about, in the sense of what's fair, the rabbis can't respond to. Right? They acknowledge it. By the way, you know that, so the rabbis theologically, right, they always had this problem. What happened if the woman passed the Sota test, but later was found to be absolutely guilty? Right? Wouldn't that be a theological problem? Why didn't she die? What, Devar? What?
They say Zechut HaTorah.
Right, Zechut HaTorah, and she must have done one of these 3 things, perhaps, that actually helped her then to that Zechut Torah overrode this, right, this transgression. But come on, right? I mean, clearly that's their attempt to struggle with the theological, conflicts that they have. That's their answer. Now let's just go on to the end here. Now Hannah spoke in her heart, right? That's the al libah. Rabbi Elazar said in the name of Rabbi Yossi ben Zimra, she spoke concerning her heart. She said before him, sovereign of the universe, among all the things you've created in a woman, you've not created one without a purpose. Eyes to see, ears to hear, a nose to smell, a mouth to speak, hands to do work, legs to walk with, breasts to suckle. These breasts that you have put on my heart, al libah, right? Al libi, are they not to suckle? Give me a son so that I may suckle with them. God, you made me for this. How can you not? Now, there's 3 sections here. I just gave you the quotes from to understand. Rabbi Elazar said, right, so there's it skips a little bit farther down on the daf. Rabbi Elazar also said, Hannah spoke insolently, right, towards heaven. By the way, the expression insolence is really interesting. Right? Hatat Devarim kalfei lamala. Right, Deborah, what does that mean, Deborah?
I think it's like throwing clods of mud.
Right, I'm flinging it heavensward. Right, and they translate the English of insolently.
Might not necessarily even be mud.
Right. I'm throwing something back at God.
Yeah.
Right, by the way, Japanese call it like throwing shoes, right? Sign of disgrace. She's actually throwing things at God. But by the way, who else throws things at God? Rabbi Elazar said Elijah did the same thing. And who else? Moshe as well. They all were insolent and threw at God. So now, leave the text for a moment. I want you to share with me for a couple minutes. Right? If Hannah becomes this model, right, of challenging authority. And by the way, Ailey doesn't get it at all. Right? Imagine this. She came, here's one question. Why did she even go to Shiloh? If she didn't believe in the sacrifices, why did she go?
I don't think it's necessarily because she didn't believe in the sacrifices. I think if you're going to put this within a Yom Kippur context, she is deeply disturbed and disappointed with her relationship with God. And what we're taught is you can only put your relationship with God right by putting your relationship with God right. Can't be done by man. She can't do it by herself. It's not just herself that she's disappointed with.
Okay, good.
She's going to give it another chance.
Going to give it another chance. So, by the way, how many people come to synagogue and say, I'm going to give it another chance, right? And we disappoint them, right? I'm going to give it another shot. And they walk away still unfulfilled again. All right.
I think she's struggling whether she believes or not, and she just wants to have one chance to just give God a piece of her mind. Just let it all out.
Interesting.
And give it to him.
Yeah. Now, I want to suggest that Hannah represents most of the people that are sitting in our shul.
Mm-hmm.
They have no idea why they're there. Right? They're there. Right? I don't know how you feel. I often feel like they're looking at me, right? They're looking up and they're going, go ahead, take your best shot. Right? Do you get that feeling? Right?
Just like that.
Right. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Like they're there in shul. Like we didn't give them a toaster. We didn't have to promise anything. Like they're sitting there, and I just have this. That's where I get so crazy. Like they're looking at me and going, "Come on, bring it on."
Bring it.
Right? And I think we missed that moment because, by the way, we're still up on the mountain, right? And we're down. And like Ailey, who didn't have a clue what she was doing, we don't often understand what our congregants are doing there. Right? I love congregants. You know, Pastor, what brings you? Right? Where are you? Yeah, go ahead, Lord.
I just wanted to add that I think that in addition to this challenge that we have in parallel to Kana, I think that just like Kana, they also want to do it their way, but they want you to give them something as well and to teach them, but it has to be like personal in the way that they connect to it. And for Kana, like she actually refused the sacrifice that was given her as part of her ritual, yet she went and did it her own way.
There was something she was getting from it, and we shouldn't negate that piece. Right? They're there, right? The whole notion, talk loli shma, bali shma, perhaps, right? Whatever reason they're coming for, we have to redirect that energy and make them feel that they're fulfilled in why they're coming.
I think also, if we keep in mind that this is really a critique of Eli as well, and also in the parable of the king's servants.
Good.
Keep the poor person from the king. Then the question is, are we the help or are we the problem? Are we
Correct.
standing?
Thank you.
Are we helping the people with God or are we standing between them and God?
Right, so if the congregants are represented by Hannah, we certainly are able. Right? We have a particular way in which we think it should be done, right? And we just don't get them. And by the way, we often complain about them. Right? We often complain about them. Many years ago when I was working with Harold Schulweiss, as his assistant, I was complaining about religious school parents. I said, right? So this is going back more than 20 years ago. Say they're just dropping their kids off because they don't care and they just want a bar mitzvah. They're not putting anything this, right? And he looked at me and said, Stewart, they're still here. Hello? We spend so much time fetching about them, right? We forget that they're there. And sometimes we're actually at cross purposes. Right? Naomi, did you have a...
Yeah, I think that the challenge and the opportunity is a question of that it's not them as if they were a body united. It's reaching everyone from the atheist to the person who wishes you'd skip the next 20 pages to the person who will get really angry if you skip a word of the next 20 pages. And finding something that will resonate and ring true to all of those pieces, and to the people who are angry with God, to the people who are searching for that, to the people who believe in God. That's our challenge. And it's exciting, and it's also impossible. And that's why we're here.
Good. So now, what's your sermon from this, though? So what do you actually, how do you take this text? Because that's what this is all about, right? How do you take an idea and then say, this is how it resonates with me? Right? 'Cause I'll tell you where I'm going to go with it in a moment, but it's going to resonate differently with everybody.
So there's a lot of non-nafkamina in here.
Oh my, there is so much, right, that you can turn into a sermon.
The harsher versus the more lenient is a perfect sermon for everybody in terms of an ayeka. How about we finally be a little less of the harsher with the alienation from the other, but most especially the self, blah, blah, blah. But I'd like to point out, Ailey does end up getting it. And I would think a good, wonderful sermon of recognition of, I don't like this us them. I mean, that we seem to have all sort of went into this in this session, and I recognize that it's only a portion of the paradigm. The only way I know to deal with it is that I'm wrestling too, folks, and I wonder if it might be an interesting sermon, the times that you've informed me.
So how I learned from you. Very nice. Yeah, Gabe.
So I can understand how Hannah is this wonderful metaphor or parable for our congregants coming into shul.
Right.
It's great they actually are coming into the doors, but at the end of the day, she gets a response from God. At the end of the day, she actually has a relationship with God and is actually believes in God. I think that's the main reason why she came there. I feel there's so many people who come to the doors who might want to believe, but then they get no response, and so they can't relate to the story, or they don't even believe, and so the story falls out.
Okay, so by the way, that's why the biblical story version is this Disney version, all right? Right? Everybody, everything turns out fine, right? The rabbis want to struggle with that. They can only do it to so much. But by the way, the sermon is, what do you expect out of being here, and what do you want when you leave? Right? Because, are they coming with the traditional outlook and the traditional questions? Because those are the ones that we tend to be answering. But Naomi said, like, how do you individualize them? So, right? What do you want to leave with when you finish here? What's your goal? Yeah.
And with that though, it's also saying it can't only be on me. We as the rabbis, we the ones who are standing up there, have to give them the permission to say, don't just rely on everything that I'm giving to you, but what is it that you're doing for yourself to allow yourself to walk out of here with what you need as well? And how can I help you find that as well and be a partner with you?
So it's not just from the pulpit, but rather how you're going to find that context. You know, how many of you feel like when you talk to congregants, they usually will give you the answer that they think you want to hear? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
This is where I'm going. Because I feel like we are in a therapy session with our imagined congregants right now. And there's this whole projection, transference, countertransference going on.
Right.
We're looking at how wrong Eli was in the beginning, and we're putting ourselves exactly in his mindset and saying, so how are we going to fix things for our congregants? And my takeaway from this is, lo adon ani. I don't have it. But I think that the paradigm, and Hannah clearly does. Hannah has all the answers in here. Adonai sagar et rachma. But miraculously, when she started having a little rachmanis for herself, and maybe feeling like there's more room in the relationship with God, because Eli said, she ate and there was this healing. And she calls herself, and she says, don't you get who I am? Sorrowful spirit is interesting, and I think a very gender-biased translation. She says, kshe ruach. Like, I'm not drunk, I'm more disciplined than, fasting. I've been fasting for the last 12 years. I can outgame you. It reminds me of some congregants that I've dealt with, the women who would have been rabbis who will, gun you down with a lot. I think there's another paradigm operating here.
Go ahead.
And it is, she says, after lo adonata, lav ika shechina v'roach hakodesh kadesh.
Okay.
Shechina and ruach are not flowing through you. But the truth is that the paradigm is ki panecha panecha Elohim. It's what Yaakov says to his brother Esau, who was the one he was wrestling with. I hate you, Rabbi. Give me your best shot. God didn't win it with me. Prove to me it's wrong. But all we really want is to receive a blessing. He says, "L'chila shalom," and the world opened. And so for me, this paradigm is about Hannah in this. She's all about the vertical relationship with God, and the healing is all about the relationship with each other. If we could see that we are panecha Elohim to each other, turn to each other and say the Chibur Shalom.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Who else has another sermon out of this? All right.
Seems to me a lot of people, they have like a sense of guilt. I'm sure a lot of us have heard people say, well, you know, I'm not really a good Jew because I think about these things or I question these things. You know, so I always try to impress upon people, not only is it okay that you have these questions, this is an essential part of our culture, our history, and our heritage. So don't shy away from it. Don't feel guilty about it. Don't tell me the things you think I want to hear. Confront it. And that's where you're going to find your own answers, not from me giving you words of a citation from the Talmud.
Good. And by the way, this is her frustration year after year after year. You have to remember that part of the text. Right? Year after year, and then she finally blows up. What's interesting here, David, do you want to add something in there?
Yeah, just this notion of when she eats the food and it's after he gives her his blessing. And to echo what is said, she is happy to get his blessing.
Yeah.
And I'm struck by so many times that we as rabbis, we don't give blessings. When I visit someone in the hospital, I don't just give them mishperach, I give them an English blessing. I bless them, I pray that, you know, may the doctor pay attention and the nurse look at the doctor. Well, you should have courage, you should have this and that. And we don't give each other blessings. And as rabbis, how often do we, you know, the Christians do it, the Rabbi did it, but all she wants out of Ellie is a bracha.
I think it's a good, I'm not sure it's a sermon, but it's certainly a sermon for rabbis, right? That says, right, do we forget how much our blessing means? I don't know about you. Like, I always think, oh, can I call that person? No, I don't know if I'll call. I don't realize, like, that call means so much to them. Right? We forget sometimes that power that we have. And even though, by the way, we don't like it. Right? We don't want to be held up on that pedestal. We don't want to be seen as being divine. Right? We've spent, those of us, right, I've been doing this 25 years, we sort of want to get rid of it, and yet they don't want to get rid of it. And so we have to realize that. So what's interesting, how much time do I have here? Are we done or no?
No, we have whole time, 15 minutes.
15 minutes still. Well, we're good. Oh, we're really good now. So any other ideas for a sermon then that come from this text? Yeah, Gabe.
Just playing off the year after year that we were just pointing out, this is the first time we're reading through it. I think the fact is that you don't necessarily get that response. I mean, Rabbi Dorff talks about, comparing field to baseball, that if you have a 300 average, you're doing really well.
Right.
And I think it's maybe a good reminder for people this time of year that you might be really thinking something amazing is going to come out of the experience, and you walk away disappointed, but yet there still is a reason to come back next year. So maybe that will be it, you have your
But why should they come back? Right, so that's the sermon, right? Is why are you here and why do you want to come back? And what is, right, your journey of life?
Yeah, whatever that answer is, whatever response is, that's why you have to keep coming back.
Good.
It may not be this year. Don't feel bad if it's not this year.
Okay, good. Who is that? Naomi, you had your hand up again, sir?
Some of us haven't spoken now.
Go ahead, sorry.
I think the issue at the end of giving the offering, of giving, her son back to God, is something we're not focusing on. What it means to give the best of yourself, or to give what you struggle to have and be willing to give away, is also another issue.
Yeah, and by the way, so this is a painful process, and ultimately she's going to have to give up the most important thing to her in order to be able to reconcile herself with life. And what does it mean to give up important things? And by the way, so are people willing to give up really important things today or not? Right? We all no. It's a great sermon, right? It's a great one.
Can we wrestle some more about, is she giving up? What does that mean in the context of the story? Is that the end of the connection to her son? There's some, because in my normal response, wait a second, how can you possibly have gone through all this and now you're giving it away?
Right. So what does that mean?
Well, that's why I'm asking for some inputs.
Right.
Isn't that what she promises to do?
She does. So the question is, when we promise ourselves things, right, do we really come through when things come to us? Forget about promising God, but even ourselves, right? If you will, either way. Devorah?
And it strikes me, obviously the story isn't a perfect parallel because Hannah brings her child to Ellie fairly young. But it seems to me like the discussion we all have when our kids go off to college and someone says, oh, isn't it terrible your kid's going away? And I say, wasn't that the original agreement? Isn't the assumption that we give our children to the world, they're not just ours.
Right. Relationships are temporary and evolve. Hold on, my guy. Right? Letting go at the right time in life, being able to let go of things, what we hold on to, what's important, right? Those are all ways of creating a sermon that speaks. Yes?
Yeah, just to echo on that, using what Rabbi Eliezer says, she never said, I want a son. She says, I want to suckle. I need to fulfill my purpose.
It's interesting. She earlier makes it clear that she wants a son. Now she's challenging in terms of what her essence is about. And by the way, so look, how many people believe that they have a purpose in life, but haven't been given out the opportunity to fulfill that purpose? For me, that right? Ein adam she'en bo right makom, right? Pirkei Avot, basically, right? There's no person that doesn't have their time and their place. Right? So how do you find that? What she's saying is, I was created for a purpose, and I've not been able to fulfill that purpose. At least that's what I take from it. Lisa?
As we're talking about this question, why should people come back year after year? Why did Hannah come back year after year?
And?
I see she has hope. She has hope that finally, one year, God is going to hear her prayer. The sacrifices are going to be worthwhile. Something is going to work. So she has hope. And the other thing that I see in the dynamic is that when she does come back year after year, it's after a year that's been unfulfilled. And so she's also bringing back this sense of loss and this sense of emptiness, even a death.
Good. So by the way,
a death of her hope of future. And so she needs this repair, but she also brings back hope.
So the only thing I would say is not just external hope, right? Because when you said word, right? But internal, right? What is it that will we change? Right? I mean, look, that's the story that we get of Hagar later, right? In terms of, right, we've talking that it was there, right? She had to be able to change. So I think you're right. How does the world change? How do we change? And how important hope is to the human condition. It's a beautiful sermon. Yeah, JB.
Whatever we might say of Hannah, it seems like Alachat Kama V'Chama, we might say of Penina, who from Hannah's perspective, she has it all and therefore has no problems, concerns, emotions, or spiritual uncertainties. So we ignore her and she gets left out of the text, out of the story, and we don't even concern ourselves with the Peninas that inhabit our lives.
Who think they have everything.
Not that they think they have everything. We assume they have everything. They have a nice home, they have a job, they have this or that. So we assume that their spiritual life is in order somehow, and they have no concerns floating around, and we tend to overlook them and ignore them, not just us, but the congregation. I think there's also something to be said to our board or ritual committees in preparation of High Holy Days, because if we're Eli, Hophni, and Pinchas, our support team. And and we don't often give them the proper message of what they need to do to be watchful of our people.
Very nice. Very nice. Lisa, you said yours already? Oh, Judith, yes.
So I've been trying to conceptualize, is there a sermon here that takes the Akedah and juxtaposes it to Hannah?
Okay.
And so, because it's rich in there. I mean, there's both Hannah protests, he doesn't, who understands what they're sacrificing, what really is the sacrifice. And it might be, I mean, she prays, Abraham is fairly clueless. Where in there is that development of who we are as conscious beings? And I don't have an answer, but I think it's an interesting path, the juxtaposition of the story of Hannah, and we have both of these texts in our high holiday text, which is good.
And I think for David Hartman, they were, right, the polar opposite. They were the juxtaposing text of how we relate to God and what we expect of God. And so the Akedah, I think, would be more like the lonely man of faith, if you will, right? This idea, like, part of us wants to have faith, but then we struggle with reality, right? When our faith hits the road and confronts reality, the real challenge you have there. And I think that speaks to it. And by the way, the fact they're both part, right, of the Amim Noarim, like, hello, like, Darshani, but But by the way, we tend, like, I don't know about you, I tend to sort of like try and avoid these texts in the sense that like they're happy endings. And life doesn't work out that way. Or we argue with the Akedah, right? No, he didn't win Father of the Year award. You know, like who would do that to their kid, right? Naomi, go ahead now.
I don't know, just what's coming to me now is just that there's an arc to this story. And part of it involves getting to a place of real depth and outpouring. And what it means that the High Holy Days can be an arc. And that it might start with dissatisfaction, and it might somewhere in the middle lead to just some kind of emotional outpouring, breakthrough, and that there's a resolution. But that means that we have to ask that of community and ask that of ourselves to actually see the experiences in art and go deep into it.
It's a very, when I was in Daiba Shalom, I don't know if any of you have this experience if you're in a large synagogue. So I would give 2 sermons during the year, but I'd give those sermons like 3 times each, right? And it didn't matter what day you gave them on, right? So Erev Rosh Hashanah was the same as second day Rosh Hashanah. The same was Kol Nidre or the end of Yom Kippur. And we have to remember that that's not the case, that we have to take them through this arc, through the Yamim Noraim. It is a process. That's what that whole month of Elul is all about. And I think it's brilliant. And by the way, for me, Yonah is like, you have to go on that journey. Now you have to get out of the whale. Right? You have to get going. And for me, that I take that, I kind of see that arc. So thank you. Yeah, Rena.
I was, what Deborah said, she said something, and I thought about, love is something that you give it away, and you end up having more. And so, I was thinking, you're such a singer. And no, but thinking about, you know, that Hannah says, okay, she's praying, she wants a son, and she's going to give it away. And after she's able to give it away, her mouth is really able to open, and her prayers are really able to be heard. And her true heart and love of God comes out in that moment.
Look how many different sermons we came up with. And there are others within these texts as well. First of all, I think what we've done by using a text like this that's inherent to the time of year is we've taken tradition and we've showed them how to massage that and how to make it really meaningful. And that's what we struggle with, is how to make that text meaningful and in many different ways. I think it's also so important in the sense that how do we get to their level in terms of understanding where they are? And I think that, for me, that's this model. And I think we often miss it. The Hartmans, like to look at, by the way, from Har Sinai, where God says to Moshe, Lech red, right? So someone said it before, go and go down from your exalted status and go down to the people, to their level, to understand them. Now, what's interesting, by the way, is if you go to the 2nd chapter of Shmuel, it's a really nice, beautiful, right, declaration of God. Right? She's gone through all this struggle and everything, and it's a beautiful poem extolling God's wonderful virtues. And the rabbis, though, didn't choose that to be the model of prayer. Right? They could have easily gone to chapter 2, forgotten all about that ugly stuff, but they didn't. Dafka, they put in that first chapter as being what prayer and what the challenge of worship is all about. So I think for me this year, what I'm thinking of applying is, our community suffered, we all deal with difficult deaths. So we had a guy who, about age 60, a brain tumor, tried everything, the most positive man in the world, right? Never gave up hope. And, right? So a guy by the name of J.D. Weiss. And it's kind of the guy, and J.D., you know him, right? Kind of person, you meet him and his wife, you go, okay, they can't be for real. Right? Like, okay, they're just too sweet and nice. Right? It just can't be. And I can't tell you how many people have said to me since his funeral, I just don't get it. Now, by the way, intellectually they get it. God didn't give them a brain. Like these people, our people know that. But I just don't get it. So for me, one sermon title is, If Life Isn't Fair, What Am I Doing Here? Right? If my hope to come here is to create this fairness of life or to argue for the fairness of life, and if life really isn't fair, Right? If my good deeds should be rewarded and my bad deeds, I want to undo them, right? And I want to get better and all those things. But if life isn't fair, if Hannah, right? Hannah says life isn't fair. But why did she go there? Something drew her that she needed to feel, that she knew that this is a place that she could be healed. We still live in a generation, I'm not sure how much longer, that our people feel that. I'm not sure about the next generation, right? Those 20s that we talk about, and 30s, who right, have this anti-institutional kind of inclination. But they're coming now, and I think this is our last shot, right? With overwhelming people to show that our tradition speaks to them. It's not us speaking over them. It's not trying to bring them to another level, but it's actually letting them know that tradition can speak to them, and when they're there, that they, like Hannah, they can be heard in different ways than we ever would have imagined. Anyway, I want to wish all of you the best and to take this and to use it. Okay?